I knew things were going sideways the minute I walked into the vendor summit and saw my name missing from the printed agenda. 9 years managing the entire procurement web for TechLinks, building trust one handshake, one red eye call, one late night delivery save at a time. And now, I was just gone, like I'd never existed. Darren Voss, the new Golden Boy COO with a jawline sharp enough to slice through budgets, had decided relationships didn't scale. Legacy overhead, he called me, said I was blocking transformation with my person-first procurement approach. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Seriously, 97% of you are listening and forgetting, and that little click keeps us breathing. Like the video too. It helps us keep telling stories like this. What Darren didn't know, didn't bother to ask, didn't even consider, was that every supplier tied to TechLink stayed not because of our volume, not because of our payment terms, but because of me. Because I remembered their kid's surgery date, because I adjusted shipments when there was a typhoon in Taipei before they even had to ask, because I didn't treat people like line items on a spreadsheet. My contracts weren't just binding, they were alive, crafted with clause structures Darren's MBA brain wouldn't even notice. Custom terms, loyalty triggers, contingency escalations built around relational continuity. You change the face on the call sheet, the whole damn rate sheet resets. But Darren didn't read contracts. He read dashboards. And somewhere in his endless PowerPoint decks, he convinced the board that procurement efficiency meant cutting the human part out. I saw the writing on the wall when he looped in finance to evaluate spend optimization opportunities. Translation: we're slashing everyone who knows how to speak vendor instead of API. He never even looked me in the eye when the memo came down. It was an all-hands email with a subject line that said, Realignment Update. I clicked, scrolled, and there it was. All indirect procurement functions will be centralized under Global Finance Operations effective immediately. No meeting, no conversation. Just access revoked and a thank you for your service form letter from HR. My calendar wiped itself clean as I sat there in my windowless office, the one I had personally requested near logistics so I could be close to the floor. Funny thing was, I didn't get angry. Not right away. I just closed my laptop, pulled out my encrypted USB, one I'd used for years to back up contract metadata no one ever asked about, and left the badge on the desk. Darren thought I was just a middleman. He didn't realize I was the damn bridge. The lockout hit while I was mid-call with a supplier in Stuttgart, coordinating expedited customs clearance for a delayed robotics shipment. 1 second, I'm confirming routing codes. The next, the screen freezes. No dashboard, no calendar, no access. Then the phone line drops. Seconds later, my personal inbox pings with a forwarded memo from an old colleague in finance, subject line, "Thought you should see this." Inside, it read like a guillotine drop. As part of TechLinks' operational realignment, all indirect procurement roles are hereby dissolved, effective immediately. Please direct all supplier communications to central operations via the new intake portal. That was it. No thank you. No acknowledgement of 9 years spent building a vendor matrix that had saved them from 3 global freight crises and a semiconductor drought. Just a sterile 4-paragraph body count. It was cold in that way only modern corporate language knows how to be: clinical, efficient, and gutting. I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I didn't even call HR. I just stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the power button, while my reflection blinked back at me in the dark glass. Then I stood up, pulled the external drive from the locked cabinet behind me, and began the quiet ritual of extraction. Every contract I'd ever negotiated, every escalation clause, every discount condition stored and indexed on a mirrored archive no one knew I kept. Not for revenge. Hell, I never thought I'd need it. I kept it because I cared. Because when you're the glue, you don't assume someone else will keep things from falling apart. The logs went into encrypted storage. The USB got wiped, magnetized, and dropped into the industrial shredder down the hall. One by one, I signed out of Slack, Zoom, SAP. No dramatic flouncing, no messages left behind. I had too much pride for theatrics. Darren would get his clean exit, but I made sure it came with clean hands. I heard from a friend in ops that Darren laughed during the next exec call. Said something like, "She was a glorified middleman. That's what ERPs are for." They all chuckled, apparently, until someone asked what ERP could handle vendor goodwill. That same night, I got a message from a supplier in Taiwan. Just saw the update. Who replaces you? I didn't reply. Not yet. Because Darren hadn't figured out what Clause 4.2 meant in half those contracts. But he would. Soon. Darren strutted onto that town hall stage like a man who'd just reinvented fire. Slides everywhere. Buzzwords stacked higher than his confidence. End-to-end visibility. Unified vendor architecture. Procurement synergy. He spoke like he'd already won, like the problems were all solved because they'd been rebranded. No one in that auditorium asked how exactly we were going to get same-day robotics parts from Nagoya to Dayton without pissing off customs or bankrupting shipping. And when he said, "We've streamlined external communications, no more vendor fragmentation," the room actually clapped. They had no idea what was coming. What Darren meant by streamlined was this. He forwarded all vendor communication to 2 junior analysts fresh out of undergrad who thought FOB was a band and Incoterms were a compliance thing. These kids weren't bad people. They just didn't know the terrain. They answered nuanced vendor requests with template replies and buried time-sensitive inquiries behind JIRA tickets with 72-hour SLAs. The first ripple came from a Taiwanese capacitor supplier who flagged a routing error no one understood, so they just ignored it. That delay snowballed into a 36-hour production halt in Wisconsin. No one told Darren. Second ripple? A long-standing logistics partner missed an inbound customs handoff because a junior rep responded, "Thanks. We'll circle back Monday to a Friday 6 p.m. escalation." The goods sat in bonded storage while fees ticked upward by the hour. And that's when the clauses started activating. See? A lot of my contracts had dormant triggers, not tricks, just smart safeguards. If the designated point of contact was replaced without formal renegotiation, terms could revert to market base. Shipping speed? Reduced. Net payment terms? Shortened. Priority support? Voided. These weren't punitive. They were protective, for both sides. But no one told the juniors, and Darren certainly didn't read the contracts. He just assumed cheaper labor meant fewer headaches. He was wrong. Within a week, 2 vendors requested new rate reviews citing change in liaison. One suspended their early payment discounts. Another quietly downgraded TechLinks' service tier. Nothing catastrophic, yet, but the current was shifting, and anyone paying attention could feel it. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. But the vendors did. Emails started circulating. Some copied in directors, some blind copied me. We're noticing a breakdown in continuity. Who now holds authority for rate approvals? Concerned about upcoming renewal negotiations. And in those emails, I saw the same question over and over behind the corporate politeness. Where's the woman who actually gave a damn? They didn't know where I went, but they noticed I was gone. It started with a PDF from Bergson Freight subject line, Clause 4.2 notification, rate realignment. I opened it out of habit. Old habits die hard. Scrolled past the polite greeting and there it was. Base pricing reinstated. Volume discounts gone. Lead time guarantees void. The bottom of the email hit like a well-aimed punch. Effective immediately as per contractual clause 4.2 following the change of account liaison. I almost felt bad. Almost. By the time the clock hit 3 p.m. that Friday, 19 more followed. Capacitors, microcontrollers, packaging, thermal compounds, even the damn snacks we stocked the fulfillment centers with. All of them. Every vendor I had built a personal bridge with suddenly sang the same chorus, as discussed with your former director. That phrasing wasn't coincidence. That was coordinated. Respectful even. A message to me and a message about me, and for Darren, it was a tsunami. Shipping delays stacked like dominoes. What used to be automatic dispatches now required 3-day confirmations. 2 vendors froze shipments altogether until appropriate terms could be revisited. Payment windows shrank from net 60 to net 15, cash up front in one case. Darren had centralized everything into a neat little procurement inbox, and now that inbox was burning. He tried to act calm, called it a minor rate transition. But by Monday, ops couldn't fulfill half the outgoing orders without emergency approvals. Clients started noticing. Sales teams scrambled. Customer success reps fielded calls with lines like, "We're undergoing strategic realignment," while silently slamming their mute buttons to swear. Then came the meeting. Leadership Sync, it was called, but no one was fooled. It was damage control. I wasn't invited, obviously, but someone in finance forwarded the notes. Darren opened by blaming vendor greed, said this was a predictable resistance pattern. He actually called my contracts emotionally inflated, as if empathy was a rounding error. But legal had other thoughts. They joined uninvited. That alone said everything. Apparently, they'd done a clause sweep and found that every single agreement I negotiated had embedded continuity conditions, tied not just to job titles, but me by name. Darren asked why that was allowed. Legal answered dryly, the clauses were approved by the CFO at the time, because they worked. Then came the real kicker. One of the board liaisons spoke up and asked, "So, we're now paying more, getting less, and lost the one person who kept this web intact, correct?" Silence. Darren tried to spin it, said, "We'll renegotiate, we'll restore terms once we reestablish trust." But trust, as he was now learning, isn't something you file a JIRA ticket for. It's something you lose once, and then you pay for it. Line by line, invoice by invoice. They spent the weekend crawling through the contracts like miners in a tunnel that was flooding fast. Legal flagged clause after clause, but the pattern was the same every time. Renewal rates contingent on point of contact continuity, not just the title, my actual name, listed explicitly as the designated liaison in every master agreement worth anything. 8 figures in supplier terms hung on the premise that I stayed in the seat. Remove me and the price protections dissolved. No appeals, no grace period, just full reversion to market base. Darren's voice, I'm told, got quieter as the clauses stacked. "How the hell did she get that approved?" he muttered in that Monday meeting, like I was some black swan anomaly instead of the person who held his operational bloodstream together for nearly a decade. The CFO shrugged. "Because it worked," he said flatly. "Because we never had a missed delivery under her watch. Because the loyalty savings beat inflation 5 years running. Because she wasn't bluffing when she said, 'Relationships drive resilience.'" He didn't know half of it. Half those clauses were embedded during contract renewals when supplier risk was peaking. Pandemics, tariffs, floods, all the disasters Darren had only read about in bullet points. I was on those 3 a.m. calls negotiating not just continuity of supply, but continuity of faith. You don't get vendors to eat air freight costs for free unless they trust you. You don't get 90-day terms from a component supplier under quota constraints unless they believe you'll call them back, even when there's nothing in it for you that day. That's what Darren never understood. That's what legal was just starting to piece together. Procurement wasn't about picking the cheapest vendor from a drop-down menu. It was about knowing which one would reroute through Alaska on Lunar New Year weekend because your ops team was about to miss a build. One of the lawyers found a clause in the capacitor supply contract with Darunotech that actually read, verbatim, "Discounts and delivery guarantees are subject to relational anchor integrity." Darren asked what that meant. The lawyer looked up over his glasses and replied, "It means they're not giving us the good rate unless she's the one asking." By Wednesday, legal had compiled a summary, 42 strategic contracts, 31 with direct reference to me, 17 contained loyalty-based pricing matrices, all of them voided or downgraded upon liaison change. Darren tried to push for renegotiations. Vendors responded with formal notices and stiffer terms. One logistics partner even added a 5% continuity loss adjustment fee. They were polite, but they weren't playing. It wasn't revenge. It was the cost of forgetting where your leverage actually lives. The call came in at 6:12 p.m., just as I was settling into a bowl of reheated chili and a rerun of forensic files. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I answered out of instinct. Old procurement reflex. Always be reachable, just in case a truck goes missing or a supplier's warehouse floods. "Is this Evelyn Martin?" the voice asked. Polished, low, trying too hard to sound casual. "This is Russell Kwan, CEO of TechLinks." There was a pause. I let it hang. "I was hoping to speak with you off the record," he added. Diplomatic, careful, like someone easing into a house that might still be on fire. He started with pleasantries, said he appreciated the years of service, called me instrumental in our early scale-up. Then came the shift. We're experiencing some turbulence with vendor continuity. Darren's changes created gaps we didn't anticipate. I sipped my water. You mean the contract's imploding? I didn't need to soften it. He cleared his throat. We're seeing cost spikes and fulfillment delays across the board. Legals confirmed the relational clauses. We'd like to invite you back to assist with renegotiations and restore continuity. I let that sit for a breath. Not under Darren, I said simply. Russell exhaled like he knew that line was coming. I understand. What would an acceptable return look like? And that's when I laid it out. I'd return as a strategic vendor consultant, contract-based, reporting directly to the board. No formal employment, no office, no overhead. I want full authority to reestablish vendor terms with zero interference. Silence. But he was listening. And I want one more thing, I added. A written acknowledgement from Darren stating that he terminated procurement continuity oversight without review or consultation. I want it documented, not for PR, for the record. He didn't push back, just said, understood. By morning, I had a draft contract in my inbox, triple my previous salary, paid quarterly through a consulting LLC, limited meetings, unlimited vendor access, signature rights retained. Attached as a separate PDF was the internal memo, a statement signed by Darren Voss, confirming that procurement functions were eliminated without formal audit or risk mapping. No excuses. Just the words. Oversight was bypassed in favor of expedited structural changes. The impact was not fully understood at the time. He probably choked writing that. But that's the price of blind confidence. He wanted to remove me like a line item. Instead, he redrew the org chart around my absence. At 9:07 a.m., I logged back into the vendor console from my kitchen table, coffee in hand, still wearing the sweatshirt I'd slept in. No badge, no passcode reset. Just a temporary login credential issued by board authorization, flagged with elevated access and a quiet line in the margin. Relational override protocol, active. Within the hour, emails started flowing in. Evelyn, great to have you back. Let's talk terms. Ready to restore priority dispatch, pending confirmation of your liaison role. We've held off escalation, assuming this would be resolved. Happy to return to prior terms. By noon, 15 of the 20 vendors who had adjusted their rates sent formal reversions, each contingent on one thing, that I and only I was listed as the point of contact going forward. It wasn't emotional, it was operational. Operations resumed like someone had turned the power back on. Logistics cleared the backlog within 48 hours. Component flow stabilized. Refunds were negotiated not out of pity, but because the people on the other end trusted I'd handle it fairly. Meanwhile, Darren's calendar cleared. The official statement hit Slack first. Darren Voss has decided to step away from TechLinks to pursue new opportunities. HR spun it with the usual corporate flavor, gratitude, vision, transition, but the staff knew. Hell, the vendors knew. You don't step away in Q4 unless someone opens the door for you. I didn't return to the office. No photo ops. No hallway reunions. I showed up once on a Thursday afternoon to sign a single document in legal, my consulting agreement. It was short. 4 pages clean. Title, External Strategic Director, Global Vendor Relations, Compensation, triple my old salary. Term, rolling quarterly, office, none. Reports to, board only. Authority, binding vendor terms, signature rights, access to operational dashboards. Subordinates, 0. I didn't need a team. I had relationships. The receptionist asked if I needed a badge. I told her I wouldn't be staying. When I walked past Darren's old glass-walled corner office, it was already empty. Nameplate gone. Chair still spinning like someone had left in a rush. I stood there a moment, watching the reflection of the skyline in that vacant room. I didn't feel triumphant, just resolved. They thought they could replace trust with tools, replace people with processes, me with a portal. But trust has a name, and mine was on every invoice that mattered. It was a quiet afternoon when I opened a fresh doc and titled it Relational Procurement, beyond the spreadsheet. Not a tell-all, not a manifesto, just a 32-page field manual from someone who'd lived through the fallacy of automation without accountability. I wrote it like I was writing to the next person who might sit where I used to, except this time I wasn't giving them a desk. I was giving them a map. The first line was simple. No vendor is loyal to a login page. From there, I built it like I built my contracts. Layer by layer, clause by clause, with lived experience tucked between every bullet point. I detailed how to sense a vendor's tone shift over email, how to negotiate without cornering, how to predict escalation before it happens. I explained why you call the rep whose kid is in the hospital instead of pushing through a late fee. I explained why the human part matters. Because somewhere between ERP dashboards and AI procurement bots, the soul of sourcing had been lost. I sent it out to the board, and the top 5 execs still standing. Didn't ask for feedback. Didn't offer to present it. Just shared the PDF with a note that said, in case anyone wants to prevent the next Darren. The final chapter was titled, Middleman, Hold the Middle for a Reason. I didn't name him, but I didn't have to. A week later, the COO's office, now run by a far more cautious interim, asked if I'd be willing to train a replacement. Someone who can preserve the relationship equity, they said, like they'd just discovered the term. I told them I already had someone in mind. Her name was Cassie Liu, mid-30s, sharp as hell, and fluent in 3 languages. She'd been a senior supplier rep for one of our top logistics vendors for 6 years, and I'd been mentoring her unofficially the whole time. Late-night calls during freight reroutes, shared playbooks on escalation language, coffee chats at vendor summits when the suits got too loud. She understood the rhythm, the stakes, the people. She'd never asked for a favor, never hinted at a move. But when I called her, told her the board was finally listening, she paused for just a beat. I've already started drafting my transition plan, she said. I was waiting for you to make the call. I smiled. I didn't need to rebuild what Darren broke. I just needed to hand the torch to someone who knew the fire wasn't in the data. It was in the trust. Let the dashboards do what they do. Let the ERPs click and hum. But the next time a supplier's route goes underwater or a truckload of lithium batteries gets stuck in customs, they won't be reaching for a ticketing system. They'll call someone who knows how to answer. The Q4 board meeting ran long. Too many numbers, not enough explanations. Everyone had the charts, supplier churn rates, margin compression, expedited freight overages, but no one could quite explain why a company that had scaled so cleanly for a decade had nearly gone off a cliff in under 6 weeks. Then the chair leaned back and asked the one question that mattered. What the hell happened in procurement? Russell, the CEO, didn't deflect. Didn't spin, just folded his hands and said, "We confuse data with relationships." No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then he added, "We replaced our connective tissue with systems, and when we pulled out the person who knew how it all held together, the whole thing unraveled." That moment, I'm told, reshaped the entire governance conversation. It wasn't just about procurement anymore. It was about how leadership understood value. Not just cost savings, but continuity, risk insulation, relational leverage. I watched it unfold from a distance, like watching the engine of a ship I used to sail get rebuilt with actual ballast this time. The new policy rolled out quietly. Every leadership contract, director level and up, now required a clause stating, "No structural changes to strategic vendor liaisons shall proceed without documented risk audit and relational mapping approved by compliance and board oversight." Translation: you can't just fire the glue and pray the parts stick. I didn't attend that meeting. I didn't need to. But someone on the board forwarded me the packet, and on the final page, scribbled in neat handwriting on a yellow Post-it, was one sentence. "Send her a bottle. She saved us 8 figures." No name attached, no press release, no public recognition, just a quiet acknowledgement, the kind that actually matters. I didn't go back to TechLinks after that. Cassie stepped in, and from what I hear, she's already renegotiated 2 deals that Darren nearly tanked. I check in sometimes, mostly to answer a question, offer context, tell her which vendor's kid is allergic to pine nuts before she sends a gift basket. I still get pinged when things wobble, not because I hold a title, but because now they know where the stability comes from. They thought I was an extra layer. Turns out, I was the glue.